Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, may the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace. Peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. So again, welcome to our Saturday class where we are reading and discussing Swami Prabhavananda's interpretation of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. It's titled How to Know God and is very much a workbook for God realization. Patanjali created the workbook, and because of Swami Prabhavananda's deep immersion in the teachings of Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, and Brahmananda, Raja Maharaj, he added to it from their perspective, and I must believe from his own. So we are in chapter 1, Sutra 18. Before we start, anything left over from last week that should be brought up or discussed, or any comment or question you'd like to make? All right. Sutra 18, chapter 1. If you remember, Sutra 17 had to do with object-related concentration. The other kind of concentration is that in which the consciousness contains no object, only subconscious impressions, which are like burnt seeds. It is attained by constantly checking the thought waves through the practice of non-attachment. So I'll read that again. It's a very concise definition. So the first kind of concentration that was discussed is object-related. Meditating on some object, the object reveals itself to you. You penetrate the outer shell, so to speak, of the object, and it reveals itself to you. And there is the idea that psychic powers, occult powers, can result from this, which are a danger and are to be avoided. So, Sutra 18, the other kind of concentration is that in which the consciousness contains no object, only subconscious impressions, samskaras, which are like burnt seeds. That is to say, they are not able to germinate into desires and so on. It is attained by constantly checking the thought waves through the practice of non-attachment. Now, this sounds a little complicated. What does it mean to check the thought waves through non-attachment? It means when a thought wave arises, you simply let it arise and pass away. You don't allow it to occupy your attention. That's why no object, the thought wave would almost certainly contain some object of concern, some object of desire, some object of aversion. So when it arises, you do not follow that thought wave. You do not allow that thought wave to occupy your attention. You simply let it arise and pass away. Slowly and slowly, over the practice, and by this I mean years, you will find that the thoughts slow and slow. There will be fewer thoughts, more space in between the thoughts, where there is just this marvelous silence. And you will find in an accompaniment to this that your breathing slows and slows. That is to say, you're headed in the direction of samadhi. Your heart rate decreases, your breathing slows, your sense of your body, your sense that you are embodied, fades. So this state of consciousness is attained by constantly checking the thought waves through the practice of non-attachment. Checking them doesn't mean stopping them. It means allowing them to arise and pass away. But by using this chess term, checking, they are not allowed to exert any power. Checking the thought waves through the practice of non-attachment. Anything to add from your own wisdom or experience, or anything that is of concern or gives rise to a question?
Brother Shankara,
Yes,
a little still gray area about the checking, because putting that attention on it even a little bit may attract more attention. How do you do this enough or
putting
to let it
attention
pass?
on what, dear? I'm not clear what you mean by putting attention
The
on.
thought process. You're saying checking your thought process and letting it pass.
Yes,
But
but what happens when you observe that a thought wave has arisen? You simply let it pass. You don't. You go back to whatever it was that you were doing in your practice of concentration. You simply return to that silence. So you don't attach any importance to and it doesn't matter how important the thought seems in the instant that it first arises in your attention.
But can we say that we can just put our attention on our breath and whatever comes and goes? So it is important for us to put a glancing
that is an object related form of concentration. When you put your mind on the breath or on the mantra or an image, those are all object related forms of meditation or concentration. So this is simply sitting. We'll practice this for 10 minutes tomorrow in a guided meditation. Practice this exact thing of simply watching the thoughts. Simply watching the thoughts. They arise, and if you don't follow them or attach your attention to them, you notice they simply pass away. The reason for this is simple and will be explained later on. It's because they are the result of the gunas. And the gunas are constantly changing. The gunas are what produces our thoughts, our feelings, our perceptions, for that matter, our actions, according to Sri Krishna. So we need not allow our attention to become attached to any particular thought. Thank you, Amarpali, for bringing that up.
Thank you, Brother Shankar.
This makes the distinction clear. If you're watching your breath, or you're chanting a mantra, or visualizing an image, or gazing on a picture or an image, a murti of some kind, then that's object-related concentration. This is non-object related. You simply are gazing into your awareness. Thoughts arise, feelings arise. You don't attach yourself, you don't allow your attention to become attached to them, and you'll notice they pass away. Slowly and slowly over time, what you'll notice is that the gap between thoughts, feelings, perceptions grows. And the perceptions, you may be sitting for concentration, and a siren goes by outside. Now, it'll be a long time indeed, before you really do not take notice of that siren. But if you just take notice of that siren and then say whatever you say, but not react to it or attach anything to it. It's just a noise that we're trained to react to. All right, siren. And then you just return to gazing. We'll practice this a little tomorrow because this is so central.
Brother Shankara,
Yes, Swayam.
so is this something that we can practice throughout the day when we are engaged in other activities, and thoughts intrude, like if I'm cooking and something else comes in mind, can I practice, okay, right now I'm doing this, let me let that thought go.
Well, absolutely. And the more you do that, the more effective and efficient you'll become at whatever activities you're engaged in. Sri Krishna is very explicit about this in the Gita, that you will become more effective and more efficient at everything you do if you do not allow other things to intrude into the continuity of whatever it is that you're doing. This is where work becomes worship, or work itself becomes a form of meditation. Very well observed, Swayan. Yes, you can. If you use the example of cooking, if you're cooking and suddenly some thought about, oh, my relatives are coming from India, and so on and so forth, and I wonder if I have enough groceries and this and that and the other thing. Well, there's plenty of time to think about that later. So you don't allow yourself to follow that train of thought. You simply return to what you were doing with putting all of your attention there. That's what deserves your attention in the moment. As I said, well observed. This isn't just sitting on the cushion. Anything else from anyone?
Thank you.
Shankara, I heard you say it twice, so I assume I've probably heard it 40 times before, but you used the phrase pass away. Thought, if I don't give thoughts attention, the thoughts will just pass away. And instantly my mind says, and that's probably the highest use for many of the thoughts that bubble up for me, is to just let them literally like pass away, like die.
Well, that's why it's said they become like burnt seeds. You know, doesn't happen all at once.
Yes.
You know, we have many repetitive thoughts, many things that are part of our repertoire. We rehearse them.
Mm-hmm.
If we let them arise and then pass away, that is, they will at first go dormant because we're not watering them with our attention. Ultimately, they will become like burnt seeds and no longer able to germinate into the desire for action or the whatever it is that they contain. Well observed. And pass away is, though I hadn't intended it in that sense, it certainly is a good construction of those words. The thoughts pass away like die.
With the intention of eventually the whole process of thoughts arising, bubbling up unsupervised from samskaras from my past, eventually they say that it just stops if I stop watering it.
Yes, indeed. What happens is you sink below it. That part of those koshas, those sheaths, continue to be active and stimulated by the gunas until they're not, until you literally appear to be dead. This is samadhi.
Mm-hmm.
So there'll be some light stimulation, but your attention has sunk below them. So it's like sitting at the bottom of a swimming pool, watching all the people splashing and playing at the top. If you direct your attention that way, you can see and even hear all of that activity going on at the surface of the pool. But if you're sitting at the bottom of a 12-foot pool, it's very quiet and very calm. Well, this is what I mean by sinking below. You sink below. And as I said, your breath slows. You don't need as much prana to sustain the kind of attention that is growing in you. Until finally it becomes one great thought, as is said. And that is the thought of what is. Swami Prabhupada calls it the living presence. And that is Savikalpa Samadhi. And your breathing you don't even know whether you're breathing or not breathing. Thank you, Amadas. Anything else from anyone? This is a good start to the discussion of this aphorism, this sutra, because we're getting rid of a lot of misconceptions about what might happen. So let me read it again and just direct your attention to what exactly the words are saying. The other kind of concentration is that in which the consciousness contains no object, only subconscious impressions, which are like burnt seeds, And notice the word, the present tense, they are like bird seeds when you've attained this state of awareness, this state of consciousness. It is attained by constantly checking the thought waves through the practice of non-attachment. So slowly and slowly, slowly and slowly, slowly and slowly, you let these thought waves, these old subconscious impressions, arise and pass away, arise and pass away, arise and pass away. They become first dormant because you're not watering them with your attention. Eventually they become like burnt seeds. And that is what happens in this state of savikalpa samadhi. Anything else from anyone? All right.
Can I ask a quick question?
I have a quick question from the side here.
Where do you want me to set up lunch?
On the counter in the kitchen, you can just clear everything off and put it either on my bed or wherever you want to. Just clear that counter off and
Okay.
put everything there.
All right.
What that is that was Jyoti asking, Elizabeth Yates, Jyoti, asking where to set up lunch for those people who have come for Seva Saturday. Bless their hearts. We have a good crowd and a lot of work is getting done. Okay, before I go on reading, anything else from anyone? When the spiritual aspirant has achieved the highest degree of concentration upon a single object, when the spiritual aspirant has achieved the highest degree of concentration upon a single object, for example, a mantra or the breath, he is ready to attempt the supreme feat, concentration upon consciousness itself. This is the state of perfect yoga, in which one passes beyond prakriti, beyond all objective knowledge, into union with the Atman, the undifferentiated universal consciousness. The state of perfect yoga can only be entered into when the thought waves have been stilled and the mind has been cleared of all its samskaras, both the evil and the good. When Patanjali has ceased to believe that he is Patanjali and knows that he is none other than the Atman. So I'm going to read that again with a few interpolations. When the spiritual aspirant has achieved the highest concentration upon a single object, he is ready to attempt the supreme feat, concentration upon consciousness itself. Now, what the Swami means is achieve the highest degree of concentration upon a single object. This isn't something that happens serially, one after the other. It actually quite spontaneously happens after you've been concentrating on a single object. You'll find that your attention, as I said, there is just this gap between, even if you're chanting your mantra, what happens is you'll notice that the mantra is still going on, but you're no longer chanting the mantra seems to be chanting itself. And so you have sunk into a silence below even the chanting of the mantra or the visualization of the image or the watching of the breath. Tom Carr has explained this to us from time to time, how this happens. And when it happens, it's spontaneous. And so you begin to practice this non-object related concentration, even as you're practicing the other. When you are able to sustain your attention on the object to where it reveals itself to you, its essence is revealed to you, particularly an image, a murti, or a mantra, you find the living presence, as Prabhupada calls it, within that. Then that holds your attention and it becomes this one great thought. So at the same time that that happens, you are attaining more and more skill in this non-object related simple awareness that you come to understand is even beyond the experience in Savikalpa Samadhi. It isn't that you are part of something, it is that the something that is aware is you yourself. This is what Swami Prabhupada means in his first instruction for meditation. The chosen ideal is you yourself, no different. So any questions about that fine distinction between the highest achievement of object-related concentration and this emergence, this spontaneous emergence of object-related concentration, a non-object related concentration, the emergence of this non-attached, non-object related. When the spiritual aspirant has achieved the highest degree of concentration upon a single object, he is ready to attempt the supreme feat, concentration upon consciousness itself. This is the state of perfect yoga in which one passes beyond Prakriti, beyond all objective knowledge, into union with the Atman, the undifferentiated, universal unconscious. The undifferentiated universal consciousness. The state of perfect yoga can only be entered into when the thought waves have been stilled and the mind has been cleared of all its samskaras, both evil and the good, both the evil and the good. When Patanjali has ceased to believe that he is Patanjali and knows that he is none other than the Atman. And this knowing is a very different kind of knowing than the intellectual kind of knowing that we're engaged in right now. So anything from anyone before we go on? All right. Yoga philosophy teaches us that it is the samskaras that drive us from birth to birth, just as strongly rooted addiction drives a man to take a drug over and over and over again, even in spite of his conscious disinclination and the efforts of his moral will. We may say and sincerely believe that we are weary of the world with its, what is that word? Interrelated pleasures and pains, the sweet and bitter fruits of the tree. But in fact, we are not, as long as these subconscious tendencies remain. Our desire to return and plunge once more into sense experiences is far deeper than we realize. Beside it, our physical and spiritual hangovers, our temporary fits of disgust, and repentance count for nothing. Shakespeare has described this recurring process of attraction and aversion in one of his most powerful sonnets. Enjoyed no sooner, but despised straight, past reason haunted, and no sooner had past reason heard.
Hated.
Say it again. Past reason
Hated.
hated as a swallowed bait. One purpose.
On purpose.
On purpose. Please, somebody else read it.
On purpose, lead to make the taker mad.
Okay, read it again from the beginning because I read it so poorly.
Enjoyed no sooner, but despised straight, past reason haunted, and no sooner had past reason hated, as a swallowed bait. On purpose, laid to make the taker mad.
So there we are. And we discover, as we practice concentration and meditation, that all of these attractions and aversions, all of what draws us to sense pleasures is so, we are eons old. And we have been in, according to Swami Vivekananda, we have been in many forms, many different kinds of bodies, many different kinds, all of them accumulating all these experiences. They are all there in our subconscious. And so we can only begin to know them when we begin to inventory first the contents of our waking awareness, then our active subconscious, then our latent subconscious. And we do this through the practice of concentration First contemplation, then concentration and meditation. And this is why it's a many years long activity. So any questions or comments or anything that you'd like to add from your own wisdom or experience to what we've been saying?
I found Shakespeare's words swallowed bait an interesting choice of words. Almost like we went out for the sense pleasure and took it, and it like a fish caught on a bait.
Oh, yes. And this is why in that talk on Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's prayer, it's mentioned that the senses are not just restive, waiting for this. Like a fish that sees a bait, we rush toward it. You know, I use the example in that talk of this young man driving along in his shiny new convertible, and he sees this beautiful young woman. This is all in cartoon form, if you can think of cartoons you've seen. This young man's driving along in his shiny new convertible, and he sees this beautiful young woman ankling along the street. Well, the cartoonist makes the point of our outreaching senses by showing this young man's eyes literally jumping out of his head as if on springs. Boing! You know, his eyes rush toward this object of his desire. So I don't know if any of you are fisher folk, you know, you've gone fishing. But if you've ever used the lightweight lures that are used to catch largemouth and smallmouth bass and fish of that kind, you'll see that the fish makes a rush toward that bait. And that's why when they strike it, the hooks go into their mouth. So yes, bait.
Is that what the world is? Bait. It's all bait. I had a thought. I've been having a thought as I've been listening to the reading and people talking about all this, that in the world in which we live or believe we live, you can't have some things or something. If you're going to have anything, you have to have everything. And what I think I mean by that is we can give our attention to limited things that are in the universe. And that's kind of what we're talking about with concentration. But our giving limited, more and more narrowed or limited attention to higher things or whatever we want to call it, doesn't get rid of all those other things. They're still there. And I understand the passing away and the dying thoughts, but they don't really die because they're energy. They just we don't engage with them anymore. And that changes things in our own apparent interior being. But until nothing is there, it's all there. That's it.
And very nicely said. And it's the just the other side of the coin of what Saint Catherine of Siena meant when she said, "We know nothing until we know everything." So We know everything by knowing the knower, that is creating everything. The knower in the frame of reference we're studying here is called the Atman. And that which is known is Prakriti. Thank you, Cindy. That was very well said. And yes, we're poking along here, one thing after another. Yes, Balaji.
I think no wonder all these Upanishads and everything says this is like walking on a razor's edge.
Yes.
Exactly, that's what our desire to return and plunge once more into the sense experience is far deeper than we realize.
Yes. It's so easy to step off that razor's edge. The joy that we find, however, is that it's not a very great fall off the razor's edge for most people in most circumstances. It isn't that we fall into a deep abyss and are lost. No, we fall, we recover our balance, and then we step back onto the razor's edge. And that's what Swayam was gesturing to when she said, is this something that we can do while we're doing our everyday activities? Yes, we can. And that is staying on the razor's edge when we keep ourselves focused on just what it is that deserves our concentration in the moment, which is, there are lots and lots of aphorisms in various traditions about that particular thing. Walking effortlessly with a pitcher of water on your head, for example.
Brother Shankara?
Yes, dear.
Hari Om. I agree with what Cindy said and with what Balaji said. And just want to add to it that, yes, all the things are still there. The world is still there. The thoughts are still there. But they lose their grip over us. They lose their importance that they had earlier. So when we say they pass away, we don't necessarily mean they literally pass away, but they pass away in terms of the significance for us.
Well, that's it. That's exactly it. They no longer signify. They no longer hold our attention or draw our attention like that bait. And this is a long road a winding. All of it, as Balaji said, on the razor's edge. That doesn't mean it isn't worth our effort. As a matter of fact, Vivekananda says, get real, it's the only thing that is worth your effort. Because what is at the end of that effort is true freedom, true happiness, not happiness that comes and goes, but to be replaced by misery, fearlessness, lack of misery, and so on. And I know from the chairs we're sitting in right now, it may seem in a way inconceivably distant. Swami Prabhavananda would say, you have no idea how close you are. If this catches and holds your attention, he'd say. That is, his words were, if you come and stick on, which I interpret as if this catches your attention and holds your attention, he would say you're just a hair's breadth away.
Brother Shankar,
Yes,
the
dear.
irony of this individual habit of going towards the senses, rushing towards senses, the irony is that, and I'll speak for myself only, I know what's right, I know what not to go for, and yet I would end up going for it.
Well, this is why the Swami made the allusion to the addict. We're addicted, far more deeply addicted than we know. It's very hard to be truly tired of this. You know, we keep what we involve ourselves in becomes more and more refined in terms of the objectness. You know, we no longer, well, I don't want to make invidious comparisons, but we just become more and more refined, but it's still within time, space, and causation. It's still within that which is being created by the gunas. And as you just said, Vijay, speaking for yourself, you know that it's inauspicious, but one does it anyway. And amen to that. If it weren't a struggle, Vivekananda said, we wouldn't be interested. He actually said that. He said, if it wasn't a struggle, you wouldn't be interested. That's what interests you most, is a struggle.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anything else from anyone?
We may like a struggle, but I don't think any of us like a suffering.
Nope. As somebody pointed out, pain is not an option. Suffering is. And but it's very hard to parse that. It's very hard to be in that. The story, if you read the story of Sri Ramakrishna's Advaita, his non-dualist teacher, Totapuri, you see a story about suffering and then escape from suffering. And even then escape from the pain. Anything else from anyone?
Well, this is the same thing even the Amrita Bindu Upanishad says, you know, even though we may not reach it in this lifespan, but the journey itself is enjoyable. Actually, if you look deep into it, you would see the proof of it.
Yes. It becomes, as Sri Ramakrishna said, quoting from a Ramprasad song, it becomes a mansion of mirth rather than a dungeon of sorrow.
Brother
Thank
Shankar?
you. Yes, dear.
Oh, yes. Could you expand on the real difference between pain and suffering? Because pain is physical and suffering is mental, and anything, any elaboration on that?
Pain is unavoidable because it comes from an exaggeration of something that the body finds intolerable. Suffering is an option because we can direct the mind elsewhere. Of course, the object lesson is Sri Ramakrishna's last year of life, when he was suffering from throat cancer that was metastasizing throughout his body. He became a mere skeleton. He could barely eat or talk. And yet there were times when he was absolutely radiantly joyous and talked to Blue Streak, because his awareness, his consciousness had risen above the pain. It's a matter of learning how to do it, which is this process of non-attachment, and then actually doing it. As we heard the story of Turiyananda being operated on without an anesthetic, and then the wound cauterized with a red hot iron without an anesthetic. And 2 or 3 days later, his attendant suddenly pulls the dressing loose from the wound so he can change it. And the Swami yelps. And the his attendant Swami says, "But Maharaj, I just saw you have this operation and this cauterization without apparently any awareness that it was going on. Your awareness was elsewhere." And Turiyananda said, "Yes, but you didn't give me any warning that you were going to do that." So he felt the physical pain in the moment and suffered whatever he suffered. But it is very, very, very difficult for us to learn how to do this. Must it take lifetimes? No. The Upanishad says one thing. The great teachers who come, the Krishnas, the Christs, the Sri Ramakrishnas, the Chaitanya Devas, they say, "I can share this with you. Take refuge in me, and I will share with you what I have attained so that you may be free in this lifetime." And Sri Krishna says, all you have to do is believe this, understand the nature of my task, and understand who I am and the nature of my task. That's all that's necessary, without mental reservation. And he says it at least half a dozen times during the Gita, in one way or another, that if you turn to me fully, without looking back over your shoulder, holiness itself shall transform you. I see no sin. I see all those samskaras. They vanish in my sight.
Brother
Anything else?
Shankar,
Yes, dear.
sometimes, when I contemplate, what I come to understand is the one that has become the many is missing its parts. Like if we lose a part of our body, we want somehow to get it back. So the one is actually wanting the parts to come back. So is ready to help. Some it draws, and then like you just said, I believe I had a hard time understanding it, but now I believe that the avatars and the great souls do come to help more people get to the one quickly.
Yes, this is one of the deep meanings of this parable of the prodigal child. There is several deep meanings. You just named one. How glad the Father is that his Son has returned. Another is Hafiz's poem, which ends, "What a sublime truth God told the world when he sang, each soul completes me." And the earlier part of the poem, it talks about just what you were talking about. Swayam, that God misses those parts when they are not, misses those souls when they are not joined. And Hafiz asks the question of God, how can a human being's worth be so much? So this is why we're told by any number of saints who have this realization, whether it be Thomas Merton or Sri Ramakrishna himself, or the Upanishads, what a glory it is to be a human being. And Vivekananda talks about it too, in The Real and the Apparent Man. He doesn't speak about it quite as such a happy thing, but just a remarkable thing. That it's only here, as a human being, that we are capable of knowing ourselves and being truly conjoined to that, and therefore free of bondage. That's in his talk, the Real and the Apparent Man, when he talks about this being the karma bhumi, the plane of action. And it's the same thing that Krishna's talking about in the chapter in the Gita called The Field and Its Known. So anyway, we'll talk more about that, all these things tomorrow morning when we discuss, well, first when we practice this non-object related concentration by simply watching our thoughts and letting them arise and pass away, not being attached to them. And then we'll talk about, we'll focus on, it's an open forum, so many other things may be discussed, but we'll focus on the niyamas, the observances, what it is that Patanjali suggests we replace the lower ways of thinking, speaking, and acting, what it is that but it won't be a talk on that. We'll just talk about what they are and then let the congregation discuss what that might mean to them. Anyway, that's the plan. Anything else from anyone? All right. Well, as I mentioned earlier, we're having Seva Saturday here. And I didn't know that lunch would get started till after the class, so I got the dining room all ready for people to come and sit in here, and they've had to go and stay in the other room, which I'm sure is just fine. But all right, dears. Om Hari Om. Om Asato Ma Satkamaya. Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya. Mrityorma Amrutangamaya. Abir Moiti. Holy, dearly beloved, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from this realm of endless noise and relentless delusion to thine abode of silence, serenity, clarity, and peace. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy wisdom and love. Lead us from death to immortality. Light us through and through. Light us through and through with thy everlasting shining presence, which is an appeal to Ishvara Ishwari to give us refuge and give us knowledge. It is a prayer to be given refuge. Saranagato. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ki Jai. Durga Durga Durga. May we be safe. May we be healthy. May we be cheerful. May we have peace of mind. May we go forward in the loving and protective embrace of the Divine Being as our Mother and Father. Any final thought from anyone? All right.
Wonderful session, Brother Shankara.
Thank
Lot
you,
of
Amapali.
examples.
Well, you know, it's hard to go wrong with Swami Prabhavananda. Until tomorrow morning, for those of you who decide to join us. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai.